running is my biggest teacher, because it's taught me one thing. It's taught me where my limits are and how to get past them, which I think is a cross-functional lesson.
Welcome, Tim. Welcome to the show, man. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you very much. It's good to see you again after all this time.
I know it's been a minute, but it's good to see you as well. You're looking well. What have you been doing? What's your secret, man?
My secret is I've developed an ultra marathon running habit. So I'm now half the man you probably saw.
Tell me more. Like, when did this happen, and what ignited that?
Well, it happened over our friend the pandemic during lockdown over here in the UK. A friend of mine thought of a challenge for himself to raise some money for a charity here called CALM, which is the Campaign Against Living Miserably, which is a men's mental health charity, basically, and helps with a lot of issues in that space, which my friend have had dealings with before, let's say. So we decided to run 21 ultramarathons. So an ultramarathon is anything more than a marathon in the month of September in 2021.
If you listen to this, you cannot see my eyes right now. They are wide open at what my ears are hearing right now.
We were all about that, really. His name's Matt Bagwell. It was called Run the Country Ultra. He created a lovely brand around it, actually, and a community around it, which is a really interesting thing because he's from our brand world. So it came together really well in terms of community and communication. But I joined in with that. I wanted to support him, ended up doing a couple of runs with him and an ultra marathon. And that stuff is kind of addictive. And here we are.
All right. I mean, it kind of makes sense that this thing would catch like a wildfire, as you just said, because it's such a great cause. And I think there is something powerful for all of us to learn about the power of attaching meaning and purpose to something that otherwise could be considered mundane, like running.
This is it, right? And I think the running's the easy bit, right? And not the meaningful bit, technically. It's the things that come with it. And I know you've spoken about this on your podcast before, but creating a sense of belonging and community around something, right? Around something that could be as dull as running, which is just moving forward and remembering to breathe, technically. Like, it's that other stuff, the stuff that packages around it, makes it meaningful, the belonging, the purpose, the reason, the communication, the community that comes with it, gives you a real sense of kind of empowerment and motivation, if I'm honest, when it comes to running.
How does then running and everything that it brings you, how have you seen it bleed into other aspects of your life?
Oh my God, this is going to turn into a running podcast, Junior, just so you know, if you go down this.
This is a people-centric podcast. Wherever people's stories take us, we just follow the breadcrumbs.
But it's, I've said before, like, running is my biggest teacher, like, because it's taught me one thing. It's taught me where my limits are and how to get past them, which I think is a cross-functional lesson for life, right? And not to go too kind of woo-woo on this important...
This is the right show, by the way. If you feel inclined to go woo-woo, this is exactly the right show.
It's awesome. Well, it's very much about connection for me, that word, right? And connection to sense of place, to nature, to myself. I run in solitude a lot of the time, but sometimes with part of communities, but without music, without headphones, and for a while, and just listen. And there's something meditative about being present and just doing the same thing, because you can't not concentrate, because I trail run, so like every root and rock is potentially a thing that can do your ankles or knees in. So you just have to concentrate on that one thing, and it's super mindful, Like it's such a mindfulness practice, and everything has changed as part of that. Like the way I breathe, like the ability to be present, the slowness of thought, right? Because I was like busy 3-4 years ago, like flying between things and projects and multitasking and playing that game of entrepreneurship that you see everybody do, right? But the art of slowing down and intentionally choosing what to do and how to spend your time has all come from this running thing. I don't think running's the only catalyst, but I think whatever you have a practice of, so yoga is another one, breath work is another one, whatever you have to practice, the thing that's not finished, that you continually improve, whatever that is for you. It might be personal development, right? It might be mastering your craft of design or marketing or communication or writing. But whatever you practice, whatever that thing is just part of what you do, slows you down and makes you choose and be more kind of intentional about stuff.
Yeah. So beautiful, and it's so deep, and it's so profound, and it's so relatable. You know, I have a decent meditation practice that I've had for 8 years now. I try to meditate for 30 minutes. I work my way up to 30 minutes. I didn't start at 30 minutes, but these days it's 30 minutes every morning. And there was a level of heightened self-awareness that comes with that I heard you talk about in this conversation, in your description of what running has done for you. And for me, I always talk about this idea that the starting point to empathy is self-awareness. It's our ability to see and hear ourselves in other people, even when the experiences do not mirror ours. Have you found that to be true in your case, that self-awareness and this mindfulness practice you found in running has heightened your ability to empathize with others? And if so, how?
100%. Exactly the same as your practice, really. Like I said, like running for me is meditative. I also have a yoga practice and a breathwork practice, which is along the same sort of lines. But there's an element connected to empathy of those, is having the skill, and I think it's a skill, of stillness, right? Of the ability to be still and quiet and just observe, whether it's yourself in a meditation, whether it's others. But empathy is the art of understanding another human being and truly understanding another human being, right? There's different facets of empathy, as you guys know. There's somatics, like when we get goosebumps when we hear amazing stories of people, or laugh or cry, we get physical reactions. That's a form of empathy. We get the cognitive empathy, which is where we truly seek to understand and we think, but we can't be good empathizers. We can't be good at the practice of empathy. And I do think it is a practice.
I agree with you 100%.
Right? Like nobody's an expert at it, right? We get every opportunity to practice empathy is another opportunity to learn and be better in certainly in the work that I've done with empathy. Yeah. But it's that stillness, the ability to observe and be quiet and really truly understand the status quo of the thing that you're pointing your empathy at, right? Comes from, it's not a marketing skill, right? It's not a creative skillness. It's a human skill.
It is.
It's a quality of a person to be still.
It is. I didn't understand the power of what you just talked about. And I didn't quite understand the power of my meditation and my ability to empathize with others until I recently interviewed Rob Volpe. Do you know who Rob Volpe is?
I've heard his name and seen him briefly on the social.
So he's an empathy, he calls himself an empathy activist. And he recently wrote a book called Tell Me More About That, Solving the Empathy Crisis One Conversation at a Time, which I highly recommend. It's a really great read. But he gives in that book 5 steps to becoming more empathetic. And the book is super practical, which is why I really loved it. And the first step is to suspend your judgment. And this is why stillness then becomes such an important step in this quest of empathizing with others, is that unless you are able to catch the voice in your head, unless you are able to catch the judgment that is naturally and spontaneously emerging the moment somebody opens their mouth, you cannot suspend it. And for me, and I hear you say for you, running did that. It allows you to be able to tune into the chatter of your mind and therefore gain the ability to quiet that mind, to be present with another human being and suspend your judgment so that you can have a shot at understanding what they are trying to say and the lens through which, the filter they use to arrive at the decision and the conclusions that they arrive at.
This is it. I think something else twigged when you were describing the book, actually. Like, I've had the saying for a long time when I've been working with leadership groups in kind of creativity, that judgment and comparison kill creativity, right? And when I say creativity, I don't mean, knitting a scarf. I don't mean art. Like, I work in the world of business, right? So we're looking at creative, like idea generation, innovation, collaboration, communication, that sort of creativity, right? The tactical, strategic stuff. But judgment and comparison kills everything creative. And I think we as people are inherently creative. I think it's buried deeper in other people and it's hidden better in other people, and people practice creativity more than other people. But I think we all have it at a degree, a bit like stillness. I think we all have it. We're just out of practice of using it. But judgment and comparison kill that, and that's especially linked to kind of empathy, really, because if you've got your brain judging and comparing, you're not understanding, right? You're not just taking it for what it is. Like, there is no answer. Stop trying to put an answer on there. Stop trying to put a label on it. Just see what it is, right? Yeah. And then you can make that decision. That's what true empathy is. That stillness, right? You need it, I think.
You do. I love that idea of stopping yourself from applying a judgment in the creative work. I wrote recently, I think it might have been this morning actually, that I don't need to have the answer. I just need to know how to look, where to look, and learn to get out of the way of the truth. Because we come to the work with sometimes an idea of what the answer will be, or sometimes what we think the solution would be. And in that, we sabotage the research or the discovery process before we even started, instead of remaining still and standing out of the way of the truth and allowing it to reveal itself in this process that we call discovery, research, whatever it is. Like, that's where the answer is. And sometimes we sabotage the work ourselves.
Yeah. You hit on the word that we use a lot in the one of the agencies I work with, the Spill team over there in the States, actually, is discovery, right? And there's a saying that I think was created by the founder, Joshua Rene. If you're listening to this, hi, Joshua.
Hi, Josh.
He always says that the answer is never known, it's discovered, right? And I think in creative work, right, in human-centered design work, which they are specialists at, right, the practice of understanding, of empathy, like, is being all right with not knowing what the answer is. Because a lot of consultants out there that you'll be able to see if you scroll, anybody who's listening now, through LinkedIn for any more than 48 seconds, there will be a consultant with an answer for you on some question. But
I'm sure I'm one of them at times.
I mean, we all are, right? We all are, right? This is why it's a practice. We're not perfect.
Absolutely.
That's it. Right? But those of us with an empathy practice, with a creative practice at the heart of us, with that belief system that it's important to do that, are happy sometimes to start work not knowing what the answer is, not knowing what the outcome is. And part of our responsibility and the challenge for people and creative businesses like ours who do that is to be able to communicate that to our brands and businesses we work for that are clients who just want an answer, if I'm honest. And we're going, well, no, it's all discovered. It's going to be amazing. And they're like, we could just have the answer. I will give you the money for the answer. But, you know, it's doing the work, right? It's the context of what you do, not what you do, that makes it meaningful, or that's powered by the empathy. And you've got to stand strong and go, do you know what? Most of this work, most of the first period of this work is us trying to understand, us using empathy, because we can't make decisions on bit part information.
Absolutely. I mean, it's so cliche what I'm about to say, but it's cliche for a reason. Like the journey at arriving at that solution is as important as the solution itself.
More important, I would say.
There we go. And that's the reason why at our agency we don't like the big reveals where we go off and do the discovery and come up with a thing and then have a big reveal of an idea. We like to involve the client in the uncomfortable, uncertain, messy part of the discovery process, because we think in that collaborative practice, the client gets value in addition to the answer itself. And the client gets context and the reasoning and the philosophy and the lens through which we looked at the problem that enabled us to arrive at that solution. Which then means that almost never do I arrive at the presentation and the client is surprised or doesn't like it, because we've built it together. We arrived at that place together, and there is almost never any surprise when we finally present the solution.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's true creative work, right? There's 4 creative skills that real creative people use. There's creativity, the generation of new ideas and new things like that. There's communication. Once we have that, like, how do we communicate it? How do we put meaning to whatever that thing is? There's collaboration, which is the art of co-creation, which is like how you work with others, like internally, externally, all the stakeholders you have to include in a human-centered business. And critical thinking, right? The solving of the problem, the strategic stuff, right? They have to be involved in that for them to have ownership of it.
Yeah.
Because otherwise if you're an agency or creative that just wants to pitch your idea based on their brief without including them in the work, and it might be a good idea, but the opposite of a good idea is another good idea, right? There's often more than one answer to the same question, right? But it's those who attach the most meaning to that answer have the most sustainable results, which is why there's a bunch of customer churn in marketing world, right? Where I come from marketing world many moons ago, right? Customer churn is hard because every agency is going, yeah, but this is our idea. And they're going, well, that's quite good. Right, that sounds like a good idea, but they're not involved in the work, right? They haven't done the work, the empathy, the understanding. They don't have the depth of context and meaning that makes that meaningful for them and something that can be a sustainable change. See, this is the work I do now. I spent years working with creativity to help people sell stuff, like marketing, branding, communication, all that sort of stuff. Just creativity to help people sell stuff. But now, in my ripe old age, in between running, obviously, I help people. I use creativity to help change stuff, because that's more meaningful. That's more important, and it's more meaningful work for me, and it's more meaningful work for the people I choose to serve, because they get something that changes something. It changes a perspective, a worldview, a proposition, a business model, right? And that's good work. That's important work for them to do. For that to stick, for that to be effective, which we're all after in the creative industry, is effective work. It has to be meaningful. They have to go through the work, right? They have to go through all the stages with us.
Yeah. You mentioned a couple of times already this idea of human-centered design. Can you elaborate on that? And for the listeners, give us a little bit of your take of what it is.
Sure. Human-centered design is it's a way of thinking and doing work, basically. So you may have heard of design thinking, which is a set of tools based from human-centered design. Human-centered design is the thinking, the intention behind using those tools, right? It's designing for people first. Like before anything, before you come up with a product, a service, a proposition, whatever you're designing, and you could design communication, which is my raison d'etre, really, is to do that. But before that, you understand the people. It comes to really understanding the people. And that means not solving for the solution, not sticking a sticky plaster on the quickest thing, not coming up with the quickest answer, like doing the long work, solving the source of the problem, the thing that will make the most sustainable change in the organization. But it's really does what it says on the tin. It's everything you do comes with the human at the center of it.
So if you were advising me on how to bring a little bit more human-centered design thinking into my agency, what would be some of the things for me to consider for the agency to really be committed to this work?
I mean, you're good, Junior, if I'm honest already. But I have had this conversation and this question of people like that have done work with us before who wanted to operate generally in a more human-centered way. And the thing I say to them is understand empathy, like focus on the understanding piece. Like before you make any strategic or intentional decision, focus on the understanding piece because that will make you more effective. The understanding in a business strategic way is the foundation of effectiveness. Everything stands on why you made that decision. So it's important that you do the work. But that's what I say all the time. I'm like, you need to be good at empathy, whether you use a tool like empathy mapping, whether you have discovery questions, whether you have whatever form or function of doing empathy, for want of a nicer phrase, that you have, right? You need to get good at that because that is the foundation of everything effective in everything you do.
We already talked about your mindfulness practice as a tool you use to sharpen and strengthen your empathy muscles. Do you have any other kinds of practices that you do deliberately in an attempt to really strengthen that empathy muscle?
Yeah, I think so. I think that there's a couple really that I use personally. I'm a big fan of kind of language being meaning making. So as a communications guy, as a brand strategist, marketing strategist sort of guy, the ability of language to create and break kind of worldviews is really strong in my eyes. So there's one form of language that I think are dynamic factors in any piece of creative or change work, and that's questions. So I've done a lot of research into questions, and there's some amazing books. There's a couple, the Book of Beautiful Questions and the Book of More Beautiful Questions by Jonah Berger is just incredible.
I'll look up for sure.
But the art of asking and structuring a good question, right, is super powerful at understanding, right? Not just asking normal stuff, like because we who practiced empathy we have to ask the right questions, right, at the right time that will give us an answer that will move the understanding forward. Right? There's a lot to that. Right. And I think again, question asking is a skill and a function of empathy that is important. But the other one is honestly just practicing it. Like trying to be practiced. I'm lucky enough to have a 15-year-old daughter currently who I don't know if anybody knows any 15-year-old daughters, but they or girls, but over here they reach a stage of kind of monosyllabic communication. So trying to interpret 1 or 2 word answers into a full understanding of how that person is feeling, what they want to do with their emotion, and that sort of thing. Yes. It's a real good practice of empathy. But then on a more serious note and on a more practical business note, like I purposefully, every business conversation I get into, even early doors, I make sure we practice the art of discovery, like as an intentional space where they understand that I'm just there to not like introduce each other and have pleasantries, but to understand their business. And whether that has to be a separate call or meeting, right? Just that process of separating discovery and making it, positioning it as a valuable enterprise for them and for me is like, it was the best thing I've ever done in my creative work, making a mandatory discovery session in everything, like everything.
Yeah, no, I believe that. And on the topic of your 15-year-old daughter, what's her name?
Mia.
So on the topic of your 15-year-old daughter, because I talk so much about empathy, I'm often asked, how did you arrive at this place where you felt empathy? And I didn't have an answer for the longest. And I'm not sure that I do. Maybe it's just a backward rationalization. But I do believe that a big part of it has to do with being the middle child to 2 sisters. As I was thinking back, why the fascination with empathy and where does this come from? That is certainly one of those things in my life puzzle that sticks out as important enough to make the connection between that and how I arrived there. So speaking of life puzzles, what are some of the important pieces of your life puzzles that will enable us to best understand you?
It's a good question. I have fortunate to have more of a portfolio of projects than one sole purpose, right? And they are all super connected. But there's 2 words that come up in all of the work I've done personally on my personal purpose and direction, which is just understanding work, right? It's just self-awareness and empathy of trying to do that. And it's exploration, or being free to explore is a sentence, and impact. Right? Both of these tools, of these language, of these meaning tools, can be attached to various things. Can be attached to live stuff, work stuff, projects, people, things, experience, activities. Right? But the 2 big parts of my puzzle are when these things are in balance. When a thing gives me both of these, right? The ability to explore a new connection, a new idea, a new place, a new person, a new project, a new company, a new thing, whatever it is. But also to use that exploration, which is a process of understanding and testing the edges, to make an impact. Either, to elevate myself or other people. Right, it can be either, but it's when those 2 pieces of the life puzzle are connected that everything kind of comes to the fore. So I'll give a couple of examples for context. So recently I've become the UK lead for a global thing called the Climate Reality Project, which was founded by Vice President Al Gore, and they are focused on doing their bit for climate change, but focused on communication and designing hope and storytelling and that sort of stuff. So there was a whole exploration of how I could make impact into that, which I believe is the one of the biggest challenge we face as a human thing. But through exploring how to connect creativity and climate change, which one is full of joy and hope, and one can be seen as not to bum people out on the podcast, but I think the answer to climate change is to be more creative in the way we build organizations and systems and communications and stories and all that sort of thing. But that's a great one. And there's also, again, to bring back the running, because why not? Like, the running used to be just me having a running practice, but now through exploration of that, there's the ability to teach people and work with organizations as run leaders who want to do kind of corporate away days and learn about creativity and climate and connection with nature and wellness generally through the vehicle of running. And the benefits that happen with running is it opens the creative part of our brain, and we're able to talk more. If you see groups of runners, they're all chatting all the time, right? And it enables us to do that. So the exploration of what running means to me, how can I use running not to just do running, right, has enabled me to help make impact with other communities and people and organizations.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. On the subject of climate change, help me understand something that I recognize in myself, but that I certainly see as the pervasive reality. How do you explain the lethargy that we all have? Not all of us, certainly not you, but how do you explain the lethargy around this important topic and issue, even among those that at least intellectually understand the seriousness and the gravity of the situation?
See, there is definitely a lack of urgency, right? Like, this is not my idea. This is widely thought in people who are on the, on the activism side of climate. There is a lack of urgency overall about how we should do that. And it's because we've reached an interesting time. The climate change challenge now isn't a science challenge. We know what to do. We know why it's happened. We know what the solutions are, but we're not implementing them quick enough, right? And that makes it a communication challenge. That makes it a behavior challenge. That makes it an understanding challenge. That means the answer to this is empathy. It's how do we give people enough understanding that they can see why climate change is important to them. So I'll take a side route, but it'll come back, right? There's two forms of truth in the world. And this is particularly relevant to climate change. There's objective truth or scientific fact, right? This is provable. It's fact. It absolutely happens. But the thing with us beautiful, complicated humans, it's that we can choose to believe it or not. Like, you see, like, the world, there's still people who believe, like flat earthers who believe the world is flat. There's literally a picture of it being a circle, literally a picture, and people will still believe that it's flat, right? So objective truth is useful, but doesn't make it meaningful, right? The truth that makes it meaningful is subjective truth, which is true because it's in our lived experience, right? It's happened to us. We see it happen that way in our world, right? It's meaningful to me. It's subjective. And that subjective truth is where the empathy comes in, right? We have to understand that for people in order to make the facts meaningful. Because they go, I don't believe it. It's going to happen. It's fine. Like, and you go, well, okay, there's nowhere to go after that. But if you can relate it to their lived experience and tell a story, a communication of going, right, you've told me about this. I know this is what you believe, right? This has happened to you before. This is how climate change can affect that. This is the impact you can make about a thing, right? But it all comes down, I might be biased, but it all comes down to understanding and communication now. Like, we know that the science bit is fine. We just need to get more people to do more action, to step more forward. to do something that changes their subjective truth about it. We don't need everybody to save the polar bears or stop cutting down the Amazon, which we should definitely do, but like as a big global picture.
Yes.
Right. But what can you do in your world to make a difference, to live your life more sustainably? I don't even want them to change their habits, but can they just do whatever they want to do in their life more sustainably will make a massive difference. But if we don't understand that subjective truth through empathy and through communication, how can we get them to understand it, who aren't, spending time and energy and money and doing work in this space already?
Yeah. I mean, it's thank you for this bit of distinction between that objective and subjective truth. I think this is really, really a powerful insight that intuitively is the object of my work, is the focus of our work, right? Because if you take that idea and you put it into a company that sells a product or a service, well, the product only makes sense in the context of your life because of your proximity and the relationship that you have with this item. But unless you can put that product or service in the context of my life, then it's worthless to me.
We see it a lot in, like, there needs to be a mix of art and science in everything we do, which is great for us because we're creative and we love that stuff. We love the contrast of things, I think, creative people. But there needs to be art and science. You can have a beautiful data-driven spreadsheet analysis of forecasts of where you've been, what's done well and why it's not. That doesn't make it meaningful unless you can package that in story and narrative. Right? There's loads of examples of that content. And some people, right, because we're all individuals, because we're all unique, there's no way around for this. This is, again, where empathy comes from. Some people want the facts first. They want to see the detail and the data and understand, and then find out what it means. Some people want to hear the big picture of the change in the thing and then have it proved by the data and the science. Like, it doesn't matter which way round that you do, right? This is the creativity of it, right? We have to understand, but you can't understand which is the best way to effectively communicate what you want this person to understand so they can make a small change in their world, in your company, whatever it is, without using empathy to get to that point of how they want that communicated.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, on the progress that's been made in psychology and neuroscience clearly points now to the fact that emotions and the subjective, automatic, system 1 and system 2 conversation is clearer than ever before, that the system through which we make decision is largely emotional, automatic, doesn't really use all the mechanism of rationality that we think the anchor or the main lens through which we make decision, which then completely supports what you just said, and the power and the importance for us of empathy. And the company itself is called Griot, and a Griot is an African storyteller. And it's again is to touch into the power of storytelling to connect and to communicate ideas and to close the gap that exists between information and meaning, which is one of the things that we really, really harp on at the agency, that there is a gap between information and meaning, and that gap has to be closed if you want somebody to understand what is in your mind. The analogy I always use is, speaking or communicating is like humming a song, and the song, when you hum, the song is simultaneously playing in your head, giving you the illusion of perfect rendition. But when you ask the person who's listening to the hum what you are trying to sing, then all they get is just noise. right? So is yes, you were sending the home, but it's that gap that exists between the information and the meaning attached to it, and it truly, truly requires creativity. It requires a certain level of dexterity with words in order to be able to bridge that gap.
100%, and that's a great analogy you use there, and I love the title of the ancient griot and the meaning behind that, right, is super important. But I think, you know, there comes a time in let's speak to the creative people like us, right? The people who offer creative services or creative change to people, that like it's kind of our responsibility now to do that work, to include empathy, right? To challenge the brief a little bit, right? To make sure we're not just creating them some beautiful stuff to sell some stuff, right? But it's meaningful and it changes, because like if we're the people who amplify voices of other people or create or give voices to other people, right? So it's common sense that it's our responsibility to put good messages out into the world, right? And we need to use empathy to understand what the true meaning of their message is, and we need to teach empathy, right? We need to lead by example, but we also need to teach it,
yes,
to our clients as part of the work, right? This is not an unchargeable thing I'm asking you to do. This is part of the work. This is the work, right?
absolutely.
It's part of the work, right? We need to teach them so they can be better at understanding, right? Which will help them make better decisions, which will help us make better creative work and do better things. And that will ripple effect. That's why I love working with organizations in this sort of thing, right? Why I'm a sucker for creative services, because if you install creativity in an organization, a new idea, a new thing, a new story, something like that, that has a ripple effect out, right? The staff, the people involved take that home to their friends and their family. It's echoed in customers who hear it, who buy it, and they tell each other. But the ripple effects that our creativity has through the amplification, through the speaker of an organization or a client or a brand that we work with, right, is just super powerful. We can't afford not to be responsible for that work. Like, it's tough, right? Not to put weight on it, but like
Of
the
course.
weight.
Yeah, it is. So we are, to my chagrin, coming to the end of this conversation, and I want to close with two questions. The first one is, given the importance of the climate change crisis and given your position, I hope this can be a plug for you. So give us our charge, especially us as people that have the platform, that understand the power of communication, that understand the power of story, that understand the power of creativity. What is our charge? What is our responsibility?
I think it's to make... I was going to use the word then sustainability, but I'm going to include responsibility, because responsibility is more holistic for me. It includes being good for planet, but people as well, but also prosperity. So what positive impact do we have internally and externally in our organization, right? So people, planet, and prosperity are the triple bottom line, right? Make sure every piece of work and strategic decision you do internally and externally for your clients goes through the lens of responsibility. How is this good for the planet? Like, what does it, even if it's a reference to it, even if it's acknowledging the expectation of your clients, customers, that they should have a stance on the climate change or their supply chain or their ethics of their supply chain, right? How does it affect people, right? Where do we stand on diversity, equity, and inclusion? Like, how do we treat the people under our care, under our service, and prosperity, right? That's lovely. But we're talking about businesses, right? It needs to make impact. And that can be impact on top line, bottom line, traditional financial measures. But that also comes with the impact of the community we serve, the community we exist in, the environment we exist in, right? We need to understand that. And there's a framework called the lens of responsibility that has those, which is human-centered design one. But it's just keep it in your mind, in your decision, go, okay, is this good for people, planet, and prosperity? Yeah. Because if it isn't, like, it's a simple 10-second question. And I think that's a charge to everybody now, like, whether creative or not, if I'm honest, if they can just take a moment of stillness, take a moment to understand where that decision sits in those three things, everything will be better.
I love that. And I love this this idea of responsibility.
People, planet,
responsibility, and the circle of responsibility that you just mentioned. You know, we in an effort to codify this, what makes an empathetic brand, we have this thing that we say one of the tenets, or one of the key qualities of an empathetic brand is an expanded sense of responsibility, right? That they understand that they are not just responsible for the product or the customers or just the employee, and that they're not just responsible for making sure that they give the customer what they want or that employees are paid a fair wage, that they also accept the responsibility for people's well-being, which traditionally felt outside of the responsibility of a business. But more and more you see this expanded sense of responsibility to say we're gonna accept the responsibility beyond just putting a good, safe product, beyond just giving people a livable wage. We're also gonna be responsible for their well-being, for their happiness, for their fulfillment, for society and the planet at large.
Yeah, and that's an expectation now. I know you've got another question, that'll be very short, but that's an expectation. Where there's an expectation, you have a responsibility to at least communicate about it, whether you deliver it or not, right? And I think that those two come together, expectation and responsibility.
Absolutely. That was beautiful. My last question then. One thing I know for sure, and I've learned it through my own experience and my work in branding, is that people have no direct access to who we are. So instead, they stitch together partial information from different touch points and different experiences to create a coherent story about us. What is one thing that most people get wrong about you?
Ooh, that's a great question. That's a great question. I think it's down to understanding and I think this again can be replicated not just for me but for other creative people. But people don't see the depth of thought that goes in before the work starts into creative processes, right? And I think because I've been working for 27 years in this sort of thing, right?
Like that at 3?
No, I didn't. Thanks though. And you have a lot of lived experience, right? A lot of subjective and objective knowledge, and you know, our job is really to understand. So we have a lot of experience of different organizations. Sometimes it seems like, oh yeah, this is the thing we need to do. Like it's easier, a minute's work, right? But that has come with the grace of 27 years work in my case, but in your agency's 100 client projects that it's that context around it. And again, it's an empathy thing, right?
Yes.
They just see the surface and go, well, he did that in 5 minutes.
I'm not I have to say I'm not quite satisfied with the answer. I accept it as, for you, the creative, I want to know about you, the human being. You, Tim. What do we get wrong? What do most people get wrong about you?
I don't know. I think I try and be me as in everything I do, if I'm honest. Like I'm this guy in client meetings, as I am here today, as I am with your daughter. But I think they don't see maybe the connection to the woo-woo-ness of it, that everything's powered by me, the spiritual side that adds meaning to everything that I do. Maybe they don't see that. Maybe I don't communicate it, if you know what I mean, as part of the process. But that's an increasingly big part of my intention and how I live, really, and whether enough people know that or not.
Do you think it's something that you failed to communicate because you shied away? Because I know from my experience, for example, that for years I've been very reluctant to talk about meditation, right? Like it's not something that I used to share with people, that I have this meditation practice and yoga and, you know, and all of that. It just felt, the word that you use several times, it felt woo-woo. And therefore, I shied away from it. Like, do you think that's why people don't quite understand that dimension of you?
I think absolutely, and it loops back to the beginning, really. I think we're all kind of like we're all ordinary human beings capable of extraordinary things, right? And I suffer from judgment and comparison at times, I haven't got it nailed. I have tools that have done, but it's definitely and as you know, as I go through change and proposition and things like that and evolve, which is part of it, then it's sometimes hard to define as well. But absolutely, yeah, I think it will end up being the thing I communicate first and then add context with it. At the moment, we're in a crux of that. But I had a similar question today, so I'm got this for Christmas, this daily Stoic journal, and they give you prompts every day, and we're on the 6th of January as we record this, and up to time date it. But the question this morning that I had to reflect on was, who am I and what do I stand for? And after this first week back, like, that floored me for a while.
All right, now I have to expand the podcast. Now I have to expand the podcast. What is the answer?
I don't know. I'm working through it, if I'm perfectly honest. I'm working through it. I think I'm more at a crux of a stage where I'm looking at who do I want to be next, rather than who I am now.
Who are you?
I'm you know, the guy we've spoke about, the creative guy, but I'm at a crux of my life, a crossroads of my life, where I think my most meaningful work will come in kind of through different vehicles than creative services. And I've been like in creative services for like 25, 27 years, as I say, and I think that's around to change. I'm pointing in a different direction. My work shows up in different ways now, like the Climate Reality Project, like the running stuff, and a lot of teaching at university. I do some, I'm an entrepreneur in residence at Nottingham University and get to work with some students and executive education participants and stuff. And it's at that change. So I'm working through that interesting part.
Yeah. So maybe a question that might inch you even just a tiny bit toward the answer would be, how do you want to be remembered?
I just want to be remembered, really, by, in whatever way, leaving. I've had the phrase, I'll tell you the phrase actually, that's an easy way of explaining it, is I just want to leave the world a better place than I found it. right? And that means you have to positively impact the people that you come into contact with throughout this thing that we call life. And I don't want to constrain it with being work relationshipy stuff. I don't like personal relationshipy stuff. Like, I think as a human, you show up as who you are, who you truly are, as often as possible, right? You will have, it magnetizes the right people to you and repels the other people like a magnet. But if you're true to yourself, if you understand, if you have self-awareness of who that is and what, there's a thing in spirituality, like what gift you bring to the world, whatever that is, what positive energy you put out into the world, I think that will leave the world a better place, right? And some people are really good at building stuff, and some people are really good at helping other people do stuff. I think I'm in the second category. So if I can leave people who I come into contact with slightly better place than I found them in, then I will be a happy man.
That's terrific. I couldn't have scripted a better end to this conversation. Tim,
Good.
as expected, it has been an absolute treat. I really, really enjoyed our conversation, and I already know I would, because I know just the kind of thoughtful, introspective, intelligent, and creative person that you are. And for all your contribution to mankind so far, and on behalf of humanity, and that's no exaggeration, I want to say thank you.
Thank you very much, Gino. I really appreciate you giving me a chance to share some ideas and thoughts, right? It's important work that you're doing, so I'm grateful to be part of it.
Thank you.